The story of Apple starts in 1976. Back then, there were no home computers, so Steve Wozniak, known as Woz to his friends, a brilliant engineer, developed his own. This computer was the first to use a keyboard and could be connected to a TV, which started a revolution. Wozniak's friend, Steve Jobs, was also interested in computers and urged Woz to sell his computer, so Jobs and Woz went into business on April 1st, 1976 as Apple Computers. Wozniak decided to completely redo his design. The new Apple II added color graphics and was a huge improvement. Jobs invited venture capitalists to invest in the new fledgling company, and after much frustration eventually secured funding to mass-produce the Apple II. The injection of cash enabled Apple to become the biggest home computer company of the early 80s. The Apple II was a huge success in the home and also with businesses. However, in 1980, IBM launched their home computer, the IBM PC. Pressure was on for Apple to innovate. The Apple III was a huge failure because it was badly engineered and designed by a committee. In the search for fresh innovation, Jobs took a team of Apple staff to the Palo Alto Research Center run by Xerox. Here they glimpsed the future, a completely new approach to computing. Up until then, all computers used type commands to enter information to perform tasks, but Xerox had invented something revolutionary. Instead of typing, users could use a mouse to move a pointer on the screen and select functions using on-screen buttons. This is called a Graphical User Interface, or GUI. Apple's first attempt at a machine with a GUI was Lisa in 1983, a high-end business computer, but it was expensive and didn't sell. The Apple Computer Company was now huge, and it was felt that experienced leadership was needed. Steve Jobs persuaded John Sculley to leave Pepsi-Cola and become CEO of Apple with the phrase, "Do you want to sell sugar water to kids or change the world?" At the same time as the Lisa was in development, Jeff Raskin was appointed to lead another project at Apple, which he named Macintosh. Steve Jobs had been pushed out of the Lisa team due to conflicts and ended up taking over the Macintosh, determined to make it into a better, cheaper version of the Lisa. The Mac was largely engineered by Burrell Smith. The software was written by Andy Hertzfeld. The fonts and icons were designed by Susan Kerr, and the graphics were programmed by Bill Atkinson. All the development was overseen personally by Steve Jobs. In 1984, the Mac was launched. Although not as big a hit as Apple has predicted, it soon became popular with anyone who needed an easy-to-use computer which had unrivaled graphics. In 1985, following a power struggle with Sculley, Jobs lost power at Apple and decided to quit the company. With his fortune made at Apple, he bought Pixar from George Lucas. He also founded the Next Computer Company to build the Next Cube, a high-end computer aimed at the education market. Under Sculley's leadership, the Mac went on to spawn a family. In 1987, the Mac II was the first model to add color graphics. By now, the Mac was firmly rooted as the computer for graphics professionals. In 1989, the Macintosh Portable was Apple's first attempt at building a portable computer, but weighing in at almost 16 pounds, it was not until 1991 that the PowerBook 100 became the world's first modern laptop. Apple was facing renewed competition from the PC. Now dozens of companies were building IBM-compatible machines running software from Microsoft. Apple sued Microsoft over their Windows software, which brought a GUI to the PC rather than typing instructions, but Apple lost the litigation. Yet again, Apple needed to innovate, but they weren't getting anywhere. Although they updated their computers with powerful models like the Quadra 950 and updated their system software with version 7, they could not compete with some of the features of modern computers like true multitasking. In 1994, under leadership from the new CEO Michael Spindler, Apple switched from using the Motorola 68000 family of microprocessors in their products to the PowerPC chip developed with IBM and Motorola. The first machine to use it was the PowerMac 6100. Another development by Spindler was to allow other companies to make Mac clones under license. It had been a great move for the PC. Several manufacturers signed up, but they undercut Apple's own hardware in price. System 7 was updated and renamed macOS 7.5 to run on the clones. However, by now it was up against Windows 95, the latest operating system from Microsoft, which saw a huge boom in people buying home computers. By 1996, Apple was in trouble. Its core market and loyal fans were not enough to maintain its market share. New CEO Gil Amelio had the responsibility of getting the company back on its feet. Amelio decided to stop development of new software at Apple and simply buy a new operating system to compete with Windows from somewhere else. BIOS was thought to be the most likely option, but at the last minute Amelio was persuaded to buy NeXT, the company started by Apple founder Steve Jobs. Jobs returned to Apple and took over running the company within a few months. He made major changes to the internal running of the company. He announced the end of the clones and that macOS 8 and 9 would form a transition to a new operating system based on NeXT technology. One of the first products introduced under Jobs' new Apple was the iMac, a brightly coloured all-in-one computer. This innovative new product was the first step in revitalising Apple's fortunes. Jobs also cut back on the huge range of models offered by the company, replacing a confusing product line with a range of gorgeous-looking computers like the PowerMac G4, the most powerful computer of its day. In 2001, Apple brought out the iPod. While there had been other MP3 players before it, the use of a scroll wheel allowed easy access to the 1,000 songs that could be stored on the new device. Later that year, the fruits of the purchase of NeXT came to bear, in the shape of macOS 10. It had a great new interface, offered support for all those modern computing features that had eluded Apple's developers, and could run all the software developed for macOS 9. macOS 10 took a while to catch on, but future versions 10.2 Jaguar, 10.3 Panther, and 10.4 Tiger added more features, and eventually all the major software for the Mac was rewritten to take advantage of the completely new system. The iPod proved to be a huge hit, but with the introduction of the cheaper iPod mini, available in multiple colours, Apple reached out to the masses and had the world's biggest selling MP3 player. Part of the iPod's success was that it worked with Apple's own iTunes software. In 2003, the iTunes Music Store was launched for both Mac and Windows. This online music store allowed people to easily and legally buy songs over the internet for the first time. In 2005, Steve Jobs dropped a bombshell. After 11 years, Apple was moving away from the PowerPC family of microprocessors and switching to Intel. This was seen as an uncertain move by Mac users at the time. In 2006, when the first Intel iMacs launched, it was clear that Apple had made a good choice, as IBM had failed to keep pace with its PowerPC G5 chip, and the new Core 2 Duo chips from Intel were going to be vastly superior for performance. This also gave rise to an interesting new feature for Mac hardware, the ability to run Windows. Unfortunately, the ability to run older macOS 9 software was removed. In 2007, after much speculation, Apple unveiled the iPhone, which pioneered the use of a multi-touch display to control it and used the same OS X operating system as the Mac to provide an amazing internet experience on a mobile phone. Apple have been busy since 2007, releasing macOS 10.5 Leopard and then 10.6 Snow Leopard, continuing to perfect their operating system. They now have an incredible range of computer products: the iMac, Mac Mini, MacBook Air, MacBook, MacBook Pro, and Mac Pro. They also have an amazing lineup of mobile devices: the iPhone 3GS, the iPod Classic, the iPod Nano, and iPod Touch. In 2010, Apple announced the iPad, a new class of device that fits between a smartphone and full computer, allowing an unparalleled internet experience and great applications designed specifically for multi-touch. Since its beginnings in 1976, Apple have evolved into one of the biggest computer companies, producing the world's most popular phones and music players, selling millions of songs and videos, and producing the world's best engineered and most elegantly designed computers, all running on the world's most advanced operating system.